Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for the Starting Strong class today. The purpose of this class is to educate and equip you for making lifestyle changes that make a noticeable difference in your health. Hopefully, you leave the class today with a better understanding of how your choices affect health and some actionable goals that you can use to kickstart your new lifestyle. Today, we're going to take a look at the reasons for weight gain and the disease of obesity, the power of lifestyle changes, how they affect your health. In particular, we're going to take a look at nutrition, sleep, stress, exercise, and mindset. So let's go ahead and begin with our complex problem. And in this case, obesity is our complex problem. Albert Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So what do we keep doing over and over again? We continue to use the solution of eat less, exercise more as our way of trying to solve the problem of obesity. And I think we've done it long enough now that we know that that's not quite going to do it all, because that equation of eat less and exercise more has a body in the middle of it that is dynamic, that will respond in different ways to the eat less and the exercise more and make adjustments. And so this simple equation does not seem to be the entire solution for majority of Americans. If you think back to the seminar video that you watched, it talked about how there were several causes of obesity, and it is a very complex disease. There can be any different number of reasons why one individual might be struggling with obesity. It has nothing to do with willpower or character flaw, anything like that. It really is more of a larger picture that we haven't included in that simple solution that we've been trying to work with for such a long time. So we have to make sure that we are willing to be open to different ideas, different potential options here to work on that problem, so that we can find a way to help each individual person to begin to get some traction and some distance with solving that problems for them. And our hope today is to show you that health and weight loss is more than just that eat less and exercise more kind of a paradigm, and that there are a lot of other options available to you that you can use to start to solve that problem. Now, there are a lot of different thoughts that we may have about the fat on our body and obesity in general. And I think it's good to take a look at both of these. Yes, we can think about it usually in a negative light, but there are a lot of positive jobs that our body fat does for us. And you can see some of those here on the screen. Obviously, it's an energy reserve. It does help us regulate our hormones, helps us absorb certain vitamins, build and maintain healthy nerves, cell walls, insulate and regulate our temperature, cushion certain parts of the body that we want to have cushioned, like heels of our feet, bony parts, right? So it has a lot of positive benefits. It has some really good jobs that it does for us. But what starts to become the problem is when we have an unhealthy accumulation of that particular organ on our body. That's when we start to suffer from some of the negative impacts, and some big ones like cardiac disease, diabetes, cancer, and high blood pressure. For a long time, we thought it was very simply an energy storage tank, but we understand now that it is a very active organ of our body. To give you an example, one of the jobs that our body fat does for us is to produce hormones. One of those is a hormone called leptin, which is a fullness hormone. And so that's the hormone that sends us the signal. We're starting to get full as we're eating our meal, time to stop eating. So we have this natural regulation of being hungry and being full, and leptin is on the fullness side. However, when we start to have that buildup of that body fat organ, it also creates other compounds as well. So we also see a lot of inflammatory compounds coming out of that body fat. And when we have more inflammation in our body, that's when those hormone messengers have a little bit of trouble. And really, it comes down to our body being incapable of hearing the message that those hormones are sending us over the noise of all of that inflammation. So if you think of inflammation rather like white noise, then you can kind of maybe begin to see how those messages just really can't be heard. So the message is there. Our body can't hear it, so we never feel full. And we don't feel full, we don't feel full, we don't feel full until suddenly we are painfully full. So that message oncoming towards the end of that meal isn't felt until we hit that pain moment. And a lot of our patients will experience that, just not that feeling of fullness to let them know that it's time to stop eating. Now, there's more to this, of course. We do have our genetics and they do play a role, but it's not just I have bad genetics. It's really the interplay of your genes with the environment around us. And so that's where we actually have to start looking closely, because the environment that we live in is not very friendly when it comes to being healthy and trying to maintain a healthy weight. We have a highly processed food environment that we live in. These processed foods are everywhere. They're easy to get. They taste amazing, leaving us wanting more. And it's not a very easy environment to live in from the standpoint of trying to make good food choices. We also don't tend to prioritize sleep very much as a society. We will tend to borrow from sleep in order to get things done. And that can cause problems with weight gain, weight loss, weight maintenance, just all by itself. We also tend to have a lot of issues with stress, and stress is a normal thing, right? We can't really get rid of that, but we don't tend to be very well equipped as a society for handling that stress in a healthy way. And that can start to have an effect on our weight and our health as well. And then, of course, there is exercise. Exercise is part of the solution here, but we have a lot of modern conveniences. We're very busy. We like to do our things. We can just click a button on our phone and dinner comes to our doorstep. We have to really be purposeful in choosing to move and strengthen our bodies. So we can see that we have some standards in our current environment that make it difficult for our genes to express themselves in a healthy way for us. Now, what you can see here is that all of these different areas are connected to each other, and changes in the choices that you can make manipulate the environment around you. So in a sense, if one suffers, they all do, but if one improves, they all do. If you can change one thing in one area, that can start to cascade into the other areas. So you don't have to change everything right away. You can tackle these one at a time, which is good because we want you to avoid feeling overwhelmed by trying to attack everything at once. So you can improve your diet. That may start to make it easier to move your body. Maybe if you manage your stress, you're more likely to make good food choices. If you are able to increase your activity, then you're likely to sleep better at night. So we really do get to see that cascade of effects, which starts to give some of that positive momentum that really helps us push things forward. This is our little tree of life here. And what you can see is all of these areas do contribute to growing and feeding a healthy lifestyle. Now, this class is provided for our bariatric surgery patients, but the information in this can apply to really anyone. But one of the myths that our patients tend to run into is that bariatric surgery is the easy way out. And the truth is, it really doesn't work that well all by itself. Immediately it does. But if it's not paired with good lifestyle changes, it doesn't stick very well in the long run. So we want to make sure that we take that tool of bariatric surgery, if that's something that you're going to be doing, and pair it also with these lifestyle changes to get the most out of that particular choice in life. So these are all long-term changes, right? Changes hopefully slowly over time become habits that start to accumulate and build together. This is not supposed to be a diet you go on for a short period of time, lose a little weight, and then hop off of it. This is something where you're trying to instill long-term changes, one small change at a time that builds on it. And if you can settle your mind into that little bit more long-term type of thinking, this will be a little bit more of an easier and more satisfying process for you. Let's go ahead then and start with nutrition. And we're going to begin the nutrition section with hydration, baseline type of activity that we all need to do for ourselves as humans. And when we're hydrating well, we feel better, we function better. We are far less likely to have issues like headaches, Our brains are going to work better, less brain fog, a little bit better with the concentration. Our energy is better. Our digestive system is better. Our muscles work better, less likely to have issues like cramps. Of course, liver and kidneys, right? All of it is going to be working better. We feel good. We're going to feel a little bit more top-notch if we are well hydrated. Of course, the opposite is true if we're running just even a little bit dry. You might feel thirsty, but not everyone does. Not always the most reliable indicator. You might feel more hungry, but some people feel less. So you might have that perk in appetite, but if you've gone a little bit too dry, you might actually find you feel nauseated and unsettled and not really have much of an appetite. But also the skin's not going to look as great. Your elimination systems are not going to work as well. You're literally likely going to have more issues with headaches, brain fog, muscle cramps, fatigue. It really is a literal drag on the day. So how do we want to make sure that we are getting that fluid in adequate amounts? You can just begin with that very standard 64 ounces of fluid per day, and that's everything that you drink into that 64 ounces. It's a good place to start. If you already drink that much or more, that's great. If you want to have something then more personal to you and your body size at this particular period of time, then you actually want to take your weight in pounds and divide it by 2. So if you weigh 200 pounds, then you should be drinking 100 ounces of total fluid per day. And if you're kind of doing a little bit of mental math, and maybe that seems like a lot more than what you currently are used to drinking, just slowly try and inch that up, right? Start at that 64 or wherever you're at. Slowly try and inch it up closer and closer to that personal goal for yourself. We don't need it all at once. We just want to start moving in the right direction. That's what we're trying to do here with all of this. Let's get specific about what kind of drinks, right? How much is important, but what we're drinking is also important. And the sugary beverages, unfortunately, are not doing us any favors. We're talking about beverages like soda and sports drinks, coffee beverages, even just regular juice. These are very common choices in our society. They are highly palatable. They taste awesome. They tend to leave us wanting more. They tend to put us in this cycle of wanting more, craving more pretty consistently. Unfortunately, though, sugar in any form is going to lead to health problems. The liquid sugar in particular gets absorbed very quickly into the body, which is going to spike that blood sugar. And this can be dangerous whether you had diabetes or not. Avoiding those repeated blood sugar spikes is important to promoting weight loss. So that's a strong connection that you'll want to be aware of. And this is also where the processed foods and the drinks can become a problem. When the machine has done the work for us, the processing that our bodies have to do is no longer there. Our bodies don't have to work to get that nutrition out. So when the machine has done all the work for our bodies, we tend to absorb those carbohydrates and those sugars much more quickly, and that pops that blood sugar up. And then we get those high blood sugar spikes repeatedly throughout the day. So just to give you an example, eating an apple will result in a more slow and favorable and gentle blood sugar rise. It's got some sugar in it. That's going to happen. A lot of fluid and fiber in a whole apple. If you are going to eat some applesauce, then that is going to cause a little bit higher spike in the blood sugars, but there's still some of that fiber, or still some digestion needs to occur. So that's going to be a little bit more dramatic, but decent. When we drink the apple juice, there's no fiber there at all. It's liquid. It gets absorbed almost instantly, and it really, really pops that blood sugar up very dramatically. So there's a significant difference in the type of food you're getting your carbohydrates from that's going to have a positive or negative effect on those blood sugars. And you'll hear the theme of trying to choose whole foods throughout this class. What are some of the specific risks of sugary drinks? Weight gain, heart disease, diabetes, right? But also increasing our risk of depression. We are going to age faster. No one wants that. It's going to drain our energy, more likely to have a fatty liver, and to develop acne. And sweetened beverages are liquids that they're sweetened with many different forms of sugar. So sometimes it's a little easy to maybe miss in the ingredients list if you're looking for sugar. So sugar is one, but sweetener, syrup, honey, molasses, dextrose, fructose, maltose, anything with an OSE at the end. Those are all going to be different versions of sugar in that particular liquid that you're looking at. And just to look at this graphic to give you a bit of a visual as well, some of these drinks have a lot of sugar in them. And to give you some perspective, the American Heart Association recommends that men have no more than 9 teaspoons of added sugar per day, and that women have no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day. So if we're looking at a soda, 12-ounce can of soda, 8 teaspoons of sugar, girls, we're out. We can't even have that whole thing. And guys, that essentially uses up your entire amount of sugar for the day. And a lot of professionals think even this is pretty high, but the main concern here is sugar sends a powerful message to your body which says store for later, which is going to cause the weight gain. Now, sometimes it's a bit of a tough switch, right? Or a change or a transition over to drinking regular water or something without much flavor in it, especially if you're really used to drinking all those sweet drinks. So you might need to work through a few different solutions and use them for a while to get yourself there. Some people can go cold turkey, but some of us need to take some time to get there. So there's some different things that you can try and do to slowly work yourself in that direction. You know, freeze the water bottles, right? Or get an insulated water bottle and keep that liquid really cold, that water really cold. You may have to add subtle flavors in, maybe some lemon, some lime. You might want to do some orange and some cucumber or some different infusions where those little herbs or fruits or vegetables soak into the water and give it just a hint of a flavor. You might have to take what you've been drinking that has that sweet flavor and slowly dilute it down over time. So maybe you drink most of the bottle with that liquid and some of it, you know, so a couple ounces of water, and then slowly over time more water and less of that sweet drink, and just kind of let your palate adjust to that slowly dialed down level of sweetness, and you will be able to get yourself to drinking regular water. But sometimes we just need to use some of these little extra tips to get us there throughout the day. If it comes to literally just drinking enough, you might need to use some tech help there. You might want to get a watch that beeps at you, a phone that gives you reminders. There's some water bottles that have the amounts on the side. You may want to mark on that when throughout the day you need to have certain amounts gone out of that water bottle. So there's some different things that you can do to help yourself, but it would be important baseline type of activity for some really good self-care. Let's go ahead now and move on to labels. So reading the information on the packages of the food that we buy at the store. And first we want to touch on macronutrients. So we're talking about fat, protein, and carbohydrates. And these are the nutrients that make up the bulk of the food that we eat and are also the substances that our bodies require in the larger amounts in comparison to vitamins and minerals. So first with protein, protein is a nutrient that is a building block of our body. Nearly every part of our body is made from protein or uses protein to function in some way. When protein is in our food, it also makes us feel fuller longer, and it requires more energy to break down and digest and pull into our body for use. Both of those are really handy benefits if you are trying to just generally use up more energy in those baseline kind of activities like digestion. And if you want to feel fuller longer with less and be more satisfied with what you ate, protein is a really helpful nutrient for that. And we also have our carbohydrates, which most of the time are an energy source for us as humans. Also, depending on what type of food those carbohydrates come in, there's also going to be the benefit of fiber coming along with that. And that's good for digestive health, not just for creating bulk, but also to feed the microbiome, those little communities that live in our gut that help us with all of our day-to-day activities. We want them well fed, and the fibers in all of the different foods that we eat are going to feed those good guys down there. Typically, we are talking about vegetables, fruits, beans and lentils, nuts and seeds, actual whole grains. So all of those plant foods are where we're going to get those fibers to keep that microbiome healthy and robust and doing us all the good favors. Now we're left with fat. And fat has been demonized in the past. we kind of went on this low-fat diet craze back in the 80s, and it's really kind of hung on in a lot of the minds of Americans. But we need to just change our thought about that a little bit. Fat is not necessarily bad. It's a fuel source for us. It's really, where is the fat coming from? There are certain fats that are going to be actually health giving to us, and other fats that are actually going to take away some of our health. And so we want to just be more specific about where those fats are coming from. And we will touch on that here a little bit later. But one really helpful benefit from fat, just like protein, is it also makes us feel full longer. So we don't need a lot of it to get that little extra perk of that elongated fullness. But when we pair it with the protein, when we pair it also with some of the fibrous-y kind of foods that we might have in vegetables, fruits, nuts, and beans, then we can get a really, really highly satisfying meal that will kind of carry us for a long period of time. And when we're trying to make good food choices, when we're trying to improve how we're taking care of ourselves, hopefully are making food choices that do help with the weight loss or weight maintenance, then we want to choose foods that don't make it harder, right? We want to choose foods that make it easier for us, and foods that make us feel fuller longer are really going to give us that benefit. When we're taking a look at our food labels, there's a few particular things that are good to look at. There's a lot of information here on these labels, but a few that I'll call to your attention. One is going to be the serving size. You want to know what that is. And then you also want to know, what does that look like on my plate or in my bowl? Which does mean you may want to weigh or measure a few times or every now and then to make sure that you know what 1 cup looks like, or a half a cup, or 3 ounces, or 2 tablespoons. You might be surprised at how much or how little some of those serving sizes look, depending on the food that you're choosing and which plate or bowl you happen to put it in. But that can be really insightful as well, just so you feel like you're actually eating what you think you're eating. You can also take a look at calories. We don't tend to get too caught up on calories. We don't want to totally ignore them. They're a measure of energy. They do have an impact, but we don't want to use those to entirely drive our food choices, because then we can make a lot of weird and maybe more highly processed food choices just because we think it's lower in calories and that's a better option. So we don't necessarily want to think that way. We want to notice calories, want to be respectful of them, but we really want to focus more on food choices and food quality, so that we're really kind of circling back to that whole food, protein rich, lots of non-starchy vegetables, a little bit of healthy fat. That's the kind of paradigm that we want to start trying to work within. We do want to take a look at added sugar, right? We've talked about how sugar tends to spike those blood sugars, and a high blood sugar leads to more of a weight or an energy storage type of a process that our body will be in. So we want to start pulling back or dialing back on those sugars and carbohydrates in our foods. And a really good place to look is added sugar, because that's not sugar that's naturally found in the food that we're eating. It was added by us as humans. If we can get that as close to zero or down to zero on as many foods as we are choosing to eat, that is going to be helpful. And then we want to look at protein, right? Protein is kind of that really useful nutrient. It's good for our body. It makes us feel fuller longer. It's an important nutrient to have. And if you are going to have a weight loss surgery, you are going to have a protein goal that is going to be given to you. It's going to be a pretty dominant focus of your food choices. So growing the awareness of where protein comes from is going to be really, really helpful for doing well with that later on. Let's also look at ingredients lists. When you're looking at a nutrition facts label, by law, the food companies can put those numbers there and round up or down within certain confines. And they'll do that to make the food look a little bit more favorable to us when we're looking at it. But the ingredients list, for the most part, is the ingredients list. It's just another good place to go to get a little bit more information and insight into the food that you're considering buying. And what we're looking for here does not have to be fancy. We're just looking for simplicity. We're looking for a short ingredients list. We're looking for ingredients that we could possibly buy at the grocery store ourselves if we wanted to make this food, that we recognize them, we can pronounce them, right? So we're looking for really that kind of simplicity and familiarity with the ingredients list and the ingredients that are there. And that's going to be a really kind of helpful clue to you to know whether or not this is closer to a whole food and hasn't had as much done to it, or if this is a very highly processed food that has had a lot of change happening to it. Let's just go ahead and look at, some of the different particular foods that you want to focus on as much as possible to build your plate. So we want to focus on protein, we're going to focus on produce, and then we're going to focus on those healthy fats. So we'll start with the protein. And for the most part, your real protein-rich foods are going to be more of the animal-based foods. So we're looking at poultry. And we're not going to get real picky here necessarily with you. If you like dark meat or white meat, either is fine. You can do different cuts. Rotisserie chicken is really convenient. If you like skin or no skin, also that is perfectly fine with us. But we just want to make sure that you have as much flexibility there to choose whichever part of the bird that you prefer. Beef is another good option. A lot of iron in that, a lot of good protein there too, a lot of different cuts. So again, a lot of freedom there for you to choose at this point what you prefer with your beef, but pork and bison and lamb are also good options. Game, so if you're a hunter or you know someone who hunts, that can be another very useful option as well. You can also do seafood, right? So we'll do the animals from the land as well as what swim in the sea. So you got your different fish, and shellfish are good protein options. Eggs are a great option as well, usually fairly economical. And then there are plant-based proteins. So your beans and lentils, those are good options. Your tofu and your soy, so that can be a really good high protein option as well. And then we're going to have our dairy, milk, cheese, and cottage cheese. You can do yogurt. You do have to be a little bit careful with yogurt because when we go down the yogurt aisle, it's kind of like dessert central with a lot of those options, a lot of added sugar in some of those. So you do want to be very particular and selective. Look for light. That's going to be a word that's going to signal to you that it's a lower sugar yogurt choice. Greek is also going to be a good option because that is a higher protein yogurt. You may have to try a few different brands and flavors of Greek yogurts. I also like to encourage choosing a plain Greek yogurt that still has a little bit of fat left in it. So 2, 4, or 5%. You can pick the one that you like. And then just add some fruit to that, maybe some chopped nuts or some shredded unsweetened coconut, and flavor that yourself. You're adding whole foods to it. It's just the plain yogurt that you bought, very high in protein. And that would actually be a fantastic way to go to choose a really good whole food yogurt for yourself. Now, once you got your protein decided on, I want to move on to some plant foods. Specifically, we're going to focus mainly on the non-starchy vegetables. And there's a lot of non-starchy vegetables to choose from. You can find lists online. Our patients get a book where they have a big list of protein foods and non-starchy vegetables in it. So that's another place to go. But this just gives you some ideas of a few of the different type of non-starchy or lower starch vegetables to choose from. And these are, of course, lower carbohydrate. They're going to be a good source of fiber. A lot of different nutrients, very anti-inflammatory here, which means it's helping your body fight those aches and pains. Now, if you're not sure if you are looking at or planning to use a non-starchy vegetable or a very starchy vegetable, the question that you can ask yourself is, do I have to cook it to eat it? And if you have to cook it, it's going to be a higher starch vegetable, potatoes being a pretty common example of that. What you want to try and then focus on are the vegetables on the right there in that basket, which could be cooked or could be eaten raw, chef's choice. But those are the type of vegetables you really want to focus on, choose, fill your plate with to get that low starch but high nutrition food going into your body. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can enjoy vegetables. And if you're already used to eating vegetables consistently, obviously keep going with that. They're very good for you. If you're not used to eating vegetables, didn't grow up doing it, just don't have it as a habit for yourself, you're going to want to start tinkering with these. Start with one, try it a few different ways. Salads are a really easy way to do that because you can get a lot of different combinations there, and you can put the good things on top. Right, you can put the meat and the shredded cheese and the hard-boiled egg and the olives and the dressing and, just different additions that really hopefully will make it feel more palatable to you. A lot of different side dishes, salsas, kebabs, stews, soups, a lot of different ways. Again, roasted, tossed in some oil and salt, put in the oven. That can be a really good way to enjoy vegetables as well. So it's really just a matter of trying these and exposing your palate to these different flavors. If you're not used to eating those, they can be a bit bitter, but over time and exposure, then your palate will become more used to using these, and maybe tolerating to even enjoying these different kinds of foods. So practice, practice, practice. That's really going to help you get some momentum in getting these kind of flavors and foods into your day-to-day life. Lastly, we want to take a look at a little bit of healthy fat. Right, again, fats are not necessarily bad, but we want to be selective here. And what you see on the screen are examples of some much healthier fats. These are some sources of healthy fat. They tend to be anti-inflammatory. And so, of course, they also taste really good. Olive oil, avocado oil are good options. Coconut oil will work as well. Of course, your olives and avocados and coconuts, nuts and seeds, butter, real butter, not margarine. Margarine is processed, butter is not. Ghee, which is a clarified butter, you don't have to buy that, but it's kind of handy if you want to cook with butter without getting the browning of butter, so you get a little bit of that flavor. And then, of course, fatty fish, salmon, for example, with those omega-3s in them. That's a good anti-inflammatory source of a healthy fat. And you can see there on the bottom of the screen that little pile of chocolate. He's a healthy fat too, if it's a very dark chocolate. If it's milk chocolate, sorry, it's just not going to be a good source of healthy fat. But if it is a darker chocolate, 70% cocoa or higher, then you're looking at a lower sugar, higher healthy fat option for yourself. And if you do enjoy chocolate, that would be a good way to go for a little treat. Now, we really haven't mentioned much about fruit or grains. And it's not because we're telling you that you could never eat those kind of foods, but these are higher carbohydrate food. So if we're trying to think about losing weight, if we're trying to think about managing blood sugars a little bit better, if we're preparing for a weight loss surgery, then these are foods to start dialing back on in your diet. So if we are looking at fruit and we want to include a little bit of that in the diet, whole fruit would be better, right? So the apple instead of the juice, for example. And if we're looking at grains, that picture on the bottom, those are all processed grains. Even if they have a little bit of whole wheat flour in them, they're still really not a whole food. We really actually want to look at the picture on top. That's a good example of whole grains. We're talking about cooked rice, cooked farro, cooked barley, cooked quinoa. Those are all whole grains, and eating them as such, not having them ground into a flour and made into a bready type of product like the bagels and the bread and the pasta. Those are more highly processed. Those are definitely what we want to start practicing eating without. And if we still really like the grains, at least focusing on that process or that picture on the top there. So in general, though, dialing back on those can be really helpful if you're trying to lose some weight or if you are trying to prepare yourself for a weight loss surgery like our patients do. And again, of course, eat real food, right? Whole foods, foods that we recognize. That's kind of really what we're going for here. And you see these generally split on into about 3 different categories. We've got our unprocessed or minimally processed foods. We got processed foods, and then we have ultra or very processed foods. So when we're talking about unprocessed, these are more whole foods. The vitamins and minerals are still going to be intact. It's very close to its natural state. There might be some processing in that inedible parts are removed. It might have been dried or crushed or roasted or frozen, pasteurized just to make it safe for consumption. So those are some of those basic type of adjustments that might be made to them, but still keep them in that unprocessed category. So carrots, apples, raw chicken, melon, raw unsalted nuts. Those are just some basic examples. Then we're going to have some processed foods. And a little bit of this is okay because we do need to process foods to keep them shelf stable and store them. There might be a little bit of salt or oil or sugar added to some of these. Canned foods would be a pretty good example. Canned fish, canned vegetables, canned fruit, right? We know what they are. They're still very recognizable, but there's just been a little bit done to them to give them that more shelf stable kind of place that we need them to have. Then we have our highly processed or ultra processed foods. These have a lot of ingredients, salt, sugar, fat, artificial colors and flavors, usually a lot of preservatives, and they tend to be made from substances extracted from the foods as opposed to the whole foods themselves. So we're talking about foods like soft drinks, hot dogs, maybe fast food, packaged cookies and crackers and cakes and salty snacks, some of the frozen meals. So you've got a lot of those kind of foods where we're not finding those foods in nature and making a slight adjustment. There are many, many steps taken to make those into the food, like the hot dog or the cracker. So those are very good examples of highly processed foods, and that's what we're trying to trim back and cut out as much as we possibly can. Let's just look at a few examples of some different combinations or meals that use some of these different foods. You got a breakfast scramble here with just an assortment of different vegetables in there. If you want to add a little bit of meat, you know, a little bit of breakfast sausage or something like that, that's fine, or some salsa and chorizo. So you can do some different options there. There's our little yogurt parfait. You can get your plain Greek yogurt. You can add some fruit, right? You can add some other, maybe some nuts or some coconut to that, just to give it a little bit of different texture and flavor. Protein drinks, a lot of our patients utilize those before and after surgery. Those can be a really handy dandy meal or snack. And of course, we've got the salads, right? A lot of different salad options, combinations. You know, you can really dress them up nicely with maybe the pickled onions and the chicken and avocado, or you can get the blue cheese and the bacon, tomato, the turkey, the egg, and the avocado there. Really, really nice combination. So a lot of fun and really interesting flavors that you can put together with those. And then we've also got something like the zoodles, especially if you like pasta. You may not have the pasta part, you'll have zucchini noodles here, but you can still have that really flavorful sauce and the meatballs and the Parmesan cheese and other toppings that you might put on or with your pasta. So it's still a pretty good level up when it comes to that exchange for the pasta. And then we can also do other meat options like the burger without the bun, but all the other good toppings that would come with it. Or you can just toss your meat and vegetables on the grill, get some seasoning on those, grill those up, and that can be a really nice way to enjoy your protein and your vegetables. So you can actually have a lot of flavor. We just have to find ways to forego those grains and breads and such. Let's go ahead and move on to the lifestyle section here. So we've covered all the nutrition. That is a huge portion of this, but it's really important that we touch on these other lifestyle areas because these are the areas that a lot of us don't necessarily think about as being impactful on our health and on our weight and weight maintenance or weight loss goals. So we're going to start with sleep. I like to call sleep the redheaded stepchild of the health world. We just don't really think about it. It's kind of low level, don't get no respect, right? Kind of Rodney Dangerfield sort of a vibe going on there. But sleep is paramount. If we're not sleeping well, it really does have a very, very dramatic impact on our metabolism, on our hormone regulation and balance. We're not going to think as well, concentrate as well, focus as well. Our energy is down, our immunity is down, our metabolism is off, our mental health. And I don't just mean things like depression. I mean biggies like schizophrenia or Alzheimer's, right? So some pretty big particular kind of health or brain and mental health conditions can be very strongly and powerfully connected to a poor sleep schedule. So it's really important that we're prioritizing this and trying taking some steps to protect a good amount of sleep. And you know, when we're looking at basic sleep, just the time frame that we can give ourselves of 7 to 9 hours is a really good place to start. If you don't give yourself 7 to 9 hours of time in bed to get the proper sleep, you're already really shorting your opportunity to get some good quality sleep and restorative sleep for yourself. And what we tend to see is a lot of imbalance that comes with poor sleep. And these little bubbles here are just showing different hormones that are going up and down and in the wrong directions when we're not getting enough sleep. That sort of tired and wired kind of feeling becomes, I think, pretty prominent here. And so we get this upset of hormones, which can show up physically in your day-to-day life. You can physically feel more hungry. You can feel more stress from the day because already with the lack of sleep, that's stressful and cortisol is already up. And now any stress in the day really dials it up even higher. So that can be an issue. If we're not well slept, we're not going to make really good, strong decisions. So food decisions, right? Any kind of dietary decisions. Am I going to go get my workout in? Probably not. I'm too tired, right? We're a little bit more emotionally volatile. We're not as safe on the road. A lot of reasons why we need to be prioritizing this and really trying to make sure that we get some good sleep. In fact, there is studies out that show a pretty significant disparity between the hunger hormone and the satiety hormone. So what we tend to see is leptin, which is that fullness hormone, drop by about 15% when we have sleep at 5 hours or less. And ghrelin, that hunger hormone, increase by 15%. You are literally more hungry and less full and satisfied just by not sleeping. So that's a pretty powerful kind of message that we really need to make sure we hear. So how do we go about trying to protect our sleep? First, we want to give us that 7 to 9 hours, right? So that's a biggie. But keep a routine. Our bodies work on a circadian little clock that is connected to the earth and the 24-hour rotation of the earth. And that might sound a little bit woo-woo, but our bodies are capable of sensing the daylight and the nighttime, and it kind of knows that 24-hour cycle. So if we can keep on our routine of going to bed and waking up at about the same times, our body really kind of settles well into that, and it's primed and ready to fall asleep and to wake up at about the same times. And so we can naturally fall into that pretty nicely once we've established it. It's also very helpful to sleep at night when it's dark. As I said, as humans, we are biologically built to sleep when it's dark. Our bodies know when it's dark, they sense that. And so it's better if we can to sleep when it's dark outside and to be awake when it's light outside. Now, if you are a shift worker and you're just kind of stuck, then do your best to create night when it's time for you to sleep. In the room where you're going to sleep, make it exceptionally dark. Get all the blackout curtains, cover up all the lights from the windows, cover up all the little tiny lights that are in your room that create that glow. Any of that can still disrupt your body's ability to sleep. So you really want to do your best to get it very, very dark. See if you can cool it down a little bit in the room. We sleep better if we're sub 68 degrees in the air temperature. And you're going to want to probably do some kind of noise management. So a phone or some kind of noise machine or a white noise machine that can really help block out any of those little noises that other people are making during the day that might disturb your sleep. So those are some things anyone can do, but also if you do have to sleep during the day, that will help. You also want to manage the light coming on to nighttime. So, you know, our bodies sense when the sun is setting and that light is changing and it's getting dim. But if we have bright lights on in our house until we're ready to go to bed, our bodies don't sense. And so we don't get that on ramp, so to speak. We don't start to get that hormonal changeover of daytime hormones fading away and nighttime hormones kind of prepping us for nighttime and for sleep. So we want to start dimming the lights in the house an hour or two before bedtime to help our body kind of get onto that on ramp and help us out a little bit. We also want to avoid the screens really close to bedtime. I mean, really 1 or 2 hours before bedtime, if we can not be looking at a computer or a TV or a phone or the tablet, those screens emit those same lights that say stay awake. And so what that means is when you're looking at a screen right before you go to bed, it is going to delay the onset of that sleep. And so it's going to keep you from getting on that on ramp to being ready for sleep at night, which means you could do something else and not look at the screens, or you could get some of those blue blocker glasses and use those and view your screens through that. Now those will block the particular wavelengths that really kind of signal that wakefulness. Also, from a diet perspective, you're going to want to avoid caffeine afternoon. Caffeine is a stimulant. It's fantastic in the morning. It does need to clear from our body, and it needs several hours to start doing that. If we stop caffeine at noon, typically by bedtime, our body is essentially or nearly cleared all of that caffeine, and it's not going to block our body's ability or our brain's ability really to be able to go ahead and start gearing down for bed. Digestion is very active. We don't want to eat 2 hours before bedtime. So anything closer than that is going to disrupt that on-ramp into getting to sleep. So we don't want to consume anything that our body has to digest. Just water, tea, simple things like that are fine. And then alcohol, the same. Alcohol wakes us up throughout the night, makes us sleepy, but then we don't really sleep. Give your body at least a couple hours before going to bed. So stop drinking a couple hours before bed to allow your body to go ahead and clear that alcohol as well, so it's not affecting your sleep. Let's go ahead and move on to stress, right? Stress is another area that I think a lot of us don't always realize is very impactful to our health and our ability to maintain or even lose weight. And we have stress, which is the chemical response in our body to the stressors or the stimuli in the environment around us, which, might be a sick family member, financial concerns, the dog that, ran up and started barking at you when you're walking down the street, any of those little things that cause that response in our body. That's what we're going to start to see having that effect. And stress here and there is normal. Chronic stress is where we really tend to see that more impactful problem. And we've got a whole list of different physical symptoms that we can suffer from because of chronic stress in our lives. Very, very impactful. We may not sleep as well. Well, that creates another problem too, right? We're, again, not going to be as likely to make good food choices because we're possibly using food to help us manage our stress. But really biggies like heartburn and heart disease and depression and anxiety, blood pressure issues, digestive issues, muscle cramps and tightness and pain. So these all possibly, or even just a few of them for you in particular, could be your physical suffering from stress that's not managed well in your life. What we want to do is hopefully live in the green and maybe pop up to the yellow now and then. That's pretty normal. If we're living in the orange to red, we're heading towards burnout. And that's really where we want to start taking some specific steps to manage the stress that we have. Certainly, if there are any changes you can make in your life to be able to back away from some of those stressors, that's a good option. We don't always have that option. But we can do other things in our lives to help manage the stress, basically to kind of help our bodies be a little bit more resilient to the stress that we're just going to have in our day-to-day lives. And some of that is basic self-care, like eating a good diet and getting some sleep and getting a little bit of activity. But you might need to do some other things, like having some kind of relaxation activity for you. It might be listening to a certain type of music. Maybe it's sitting in a bubble bath and having a little bit of quiet time. And maybe it's hiding in the closet for 10 minutes from your kids, right? Maybe it's journaling, meditation, breathing exercises, a specific hobby that you really enjoy that's just for you. Maybe it's just being able to talk it out, having friends or family that give you that just support and listening ear. That can be really, really helpful as well. But there are a lot of different ways to reduce stress and management. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. And so you do have to figure out what tends to work for you and what you can realistically fill into your day to help manage that and not create another stressor, right? There has to be that balance there. But a lot of different things that you can try to help manage that so the impact is much less. Now, we should talk about activity. Diet and exercise are part of this, and we want to pay attention. We just don't want to only rely on those two usually. But we have to be careful with exercise. We tend to view exercise as a way to pay for our dietary choices, and we really don't want to do that, right? This is not our way to pay for foods that we think are naughty or that we want to be able to eat later. And part of that is the mindset, but part of that is it really actually doesn't work out. You have to work out a lot just to pay for a 20-ounce bottle of soda, right? You got a lot of miles to put in to compensate for that. So we want to make sure we're not thinking about it in that way. Exercise is very, very beneficial in so many other ways than just helping us to lose weight. And if we're not exercising, we are at higher risk for, yes, obesity, but the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the cancer, the heart disease, the mental health, again, high cholesterol. So there's a lot of other physical ailments that will be perpetuated simply by not having some activity in our lives. So we want to make sure that we are able to enjoy as many of the benefits from exercise as possible just by having it be a fairly consistent activity in our lives, right? So we're going to be stronger, not only physically with our muscles and our bones, but mentally, physically. Our brain is actually going to work better, but then mentally, right? We're actually going to feel a little bit better about ourselves. Mood is going to be a little bit better. Immunity is better. Sleep quality is better. Energy level is better. Pain management is better. A lot of benefits from moving the body that that we really want to make sure we're taking advantage of here. So how do we get going with this, right? Want to make sure we start somewhere. And I think it's important to be careful that we don't just think about the stereotypical, I need to go to the gym and I need to work out for an hour 5 days a week. For some people, that is a fantastic way to go, but for some, it's really not. So start with something that you feel is very realistic for you. Think about what you can actually physically do. And for you, perhaps just walking down to the mailbox each day would be a great feat, and that's what you want to set as your first goal. And for some, maybe it's going for that walk every day, riding the bike. Maybe it's doing yoga. Maybe it's going to the gym and lifting weights. But make sure you're picking something that is nearly at your current fitness level. That's a little bit of a challenge, but not too much, right? We want to take little steps here, set a fairly low bar for yourself. So it's very, very realistic to begin and to continue with. And then decide what you're going to do. It should be something that either you really enjoy or can tolerate well enough to be consistent with. So something that's realistic and you can keep up with. Make sure you have whatever you need. Might be nothing, but maybe you need a new pair of shoes. Maybe you should make sure you take your jacket. Maybe you need the gym membership or you want to buy the bike. You decide, but make sure that you have what you need to do it. And then just give it a go, right? Just do it. That's what Nike says. Just go give it a try and be prepared to make adjustments. It is highly unlikely that it will be perfect and spot on the first time that you go and do this little workout session that you're thinking about. You're probably going to have to change something. Maybe it was too hard, it was too easy, you decided you hated it, you really actually didn't have everything you needed. There's going to be some adjustments. So go in mentally, not having that really lofty kind of idea that it's going to be amazing, kind of going with just a very low level. I'm going to give this a try. We're going to see what we need to change, and we're going to move on and make adjustments from there, because you don't want to get into it, get disappointed, and then, feel like quitting. We want to start really low and kind of work up. So monitor and adjust. And this is going to be something that you have to do anyway, because as you start getting into this and you start to get stronger, you're going to have to dial it up a little bit, right? You're going to have to make it harder. You're going to have to go farther. You're going to have to do it longer to make it more challenging for yourself. And so those are the adjustments you want to learn how to make for yourself. It's important that we take a little bit of a look here at mindset. This is meant to be a long-term change. We need to think about it in that context. And so you want to kind of think about also, what does that future version of me look like? What kind of identity do I want to have? How does that person think? What kind of choices does that person make? And so just in the way that you might be making choices with your diet or your exercise, which is going to affect you physically, you also want to make changes in your mind about how you see yourself mentally and emotionally. And this is going to be a practice just like everything else is. And it really kind of comes down to practicing an internal dialogue that matches the version of yourself that you think you want to be. So, for example, if you want to be a person who exercises, you need to say in your mind, I'm a person who exercises. Especially if you have that kind of built-in negative self-talk for yourself, you want to start counteracting with that with, no, I'm a person who exercises and I go for a walk after dinner every night. Or it might be, I'm a person who eats healthy, so I am going to have some salad with my dinner tonight. Or I'm a person who prioritizes sleep, so I make sure I go to bed at 10 o'clock every night. And it may feel awkward, but you will start to rewire and re-record over those negative self-talk or conversations that you have. And you'll start to automatically, after some practice and time, think in the way that you want to think about yourself. So just make sure that you don't forget that mind and that internal conversation that you have, in addition to some of the other more physical kind of changes that you might be working on. And, really just to kind of bring it to a close, make sure you have support. Look at your friends, look at your family, maybe look at community members. There might be groups of people in the community who like to do the same kind of things that you are hoping to do, a walking group. Maybe there's a hobby that you really enjoy that helps you manage your stress, and there's a group in the community, at the library, whatever, that does that kind of a thing. You go do it with them. So make sure you're seeking out the groups of people who are doing and enjoying the same things and prioritizing some of the same things you are, so you have that support around you. And if you are in our program here at St. Luke's, then we have support for you as well. And you don't actually have to be a part of our program to enjoy some of these. We have cooking classes, we have healthy living classes that we run. We have support groups once a month for our weight loss surgery patients. So you certainly are free to reach out and contact us if you have any interest in any of those. And what you'll want to do is send us an email if you're interested in any of those classes. And the email address is bariatricsupport@slhs.org. That's bariatricsupport@slhs.org. And that's where you can send in and say, hey, I want to go to that cooking class once a month. Would you please sign me up? And you can let us know and we'll contact you and get that taken care of for you. That wraps it up for this Starting Strong class. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. Definitely reach out to us if you have any questions or are interested in learning more about our program. Have a good day.